Good morning, Minnesota DFLers, and welcome to the DFL Daily. Richard Carbaum here, chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. So great to be with you each and every morning at 10:45 to make sure you have the message, the actions, and the tools to make sure that you can take one more concrete step toward winning big in the 2026 midterm election this November. Start off by saying thank you to folks in 49, Senate Districts 49, 51, 52, 55, 63 for having me over the weekend. Really appreciated being able to fire up Democrats and see all the new faces in the crowd. All these new bodies coming into to do the work of electing Democrats is really critical. And I'm so happy to see the energy and enthusiasm continuing out and about across Minnesota. A couple of things coming up this week. Senate District 26 is hosting a virtual candidate forum tonight at 6:30 p.m. Tomorrow we'll have a field leadership training for campaign supporters in Chaska at 6:30 p.m. And in Preston, they're hosting office hours tomorrow, Tuesday, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Pick up a button or campaign sign or just swing by to chat. Everyone is welcome. For more information and on future events, you can go to dfl.org/events. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about today, what we're seeing in the news. So recently, the New York Times had an article about Georgia's special election that had the largest shift towards Democrats, about 25 points of any congressional contest since President Trump took office for his second term. This, of course, is Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, the reddest CD in Georgia, that shifted massively towards Democrats. Northern News Now had an article, Minnesota Senate passed updated healthcare legislation Tuesday night, which rural hospitals are calling critical. That, of course, is due to the DFL Senate majority. The Center Square said, quote, Minnesota graduation rates hit a record high for a second straight year, and state officials credited the gains to universal school meals, expanded mental health care resources, increased teacher pay, and the state's child tax credit. Of course, Republicans in Washington are doing everything they can to gut Medicaid and cut SNAP. That is really a difference. And then then Fox 9 had this article, Minnesota's child tax credit could increase for families in 2026. And then CBS News had this article, Minnesota legislature aims to tackle surveillance pricing. Of course, this is that practice where they literally change the price of the same product from person to person. But with the support of union workers, DFL leaders say they hope the tactics don't come to Minnesota anytime soon. With a divided Minnesota legislature, of course, any bill is going to need both Democrats and Republican support. But do you see a pattern in all this? Democrats continue to deliver on Minnesota values. Republicans are obstructing choosing their priorities of few billionaire supporters of theirs instead of the people they're elected to serve. That's where our message lives this week. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about our message memo that we send out every Friday and make sure that you have the message this week around affordability. And of course, we're going to continue to talk about affordability because the affordability crisis is real. Democrats are doing everything we can to confront it head on, and Republicans are once again choosing their own priorities. So our core message this week is simple: Minnesota values versus Republican priorities. We're going to share this week's message memo in the chat right now as well. This is what we want folks to remember. This is the message for your neighbors, social media, and any community organizations that you're a part of. This week, we put these ideas front and center in our communications. So first and foremost, in Minnesota, we believe if you work hard, you should be able to get ahead. You should be able to keep food on the table and afford a home, childcare, and healthcare. But for too many families, that's slipping out of reach. Costs keep going up, and people are being asked to do more with less. Republican priorities are breaking the promise of the American dream. They're driving up costs while they give tax breaks to billionaires, protect big corporations, and fund a war of choice in the Middle East. Minnesotans want leaders who share our values, work hard for us, and fix what's driving prices up in the first place. Republican price gouging, corporate middlemen, and systems built to benefit the uber rich is what Republicans are focused on. Democrats are fighting for fairness, self-respect, and the ability to support a family, core values we all share. Minnesotans deserve a little breathing room. That means bringing down the costs of the basics, driving serious solutions to prevent waste and abuse, and making the system work by investing in Minnesota families. We've seen it work in Minnesota, and we have more work to do here as well. Facts matter. They give our message credibility. So here's some data. Here's the data that supports the story of what we all see on the ground. First off, the new Trump war budget, Trump is asking for 1.5 trillion with a T in military spending in 2027. For that, we could provide free school lunches to every child, deliver a $30,000 raise to every public school teacher, and send $1,000 checks to every U.S. citizen. Not even for not even a third of Trump's 2027 budget for his new Iran war, and Pete Hegseth's Pentagon. The Trump budget cuts are real. The 2027 budget also cuts $3.4 billion from NASA science and research programs, eliminates the Job Corps, and cuts $5 billion from the National Institutes of Health funding, among billions in other cuts. Here in Minnesota, Democrats have invested in public schools, in nursing homes. We've invested in free college for low-income families. We stood up and have one of the most robust paid family and medical leave programs in the country. We expanded Medicaid coverage. We have new housing projects across the state, and we expanded rural broadband. And finally, as we all know, we have free breakfast and lunch for our kids in our schools, all while putting $3.5 billion in our rainy day fund. The single largest investment Democrats made over the last 4 years, $3.5 billion into the savings account to try and protect our economy from the Trump chaos. And to boot, we passed the largest tax cut in state history. When I hear those facts, to me, they tell a very powerful story. What do you hear with those facts? Pop some of your thoughts into the chat about what story comes to mind. One of the most powerful things we can do is highlight certain quotes that help us articulate our message. The easiest way to explain what's happening is to let people's words speak for themselves. So some of the quotes driving our message this week, I like a lot of these. First one up, this is from a Minnesota voter in April of 2026. They filled out a DFL survey. Quote, "The cost of living has hit our family hard, groceries and gas especially. If things get more expensive, I don't know how we will continue." This next quote is from, again, the same survey, Minnesota voter, April 2026. Quote, "We can't pay for day-to-day life, especially since daycare is so incredibly expensive. We make too much money to qualify for any aid, but we are barely living paycheck to paycheck." This next one is from Donald Trump on prioritizing war spending over American families. "We can't take care of daycare." He wants to fund his war, not daycare. Republican Senate candidate Michelle Tafoya famously told us, "Take one less trip to Starbucks." That's how we meet this economic moment. U.S. Senator Tina Smith, Donald Trump, quote, "Donald Trump would rather spend money on yet another unjustified war in the Middle East than on our own citizens." And then finally, the boss, Bruce Springsteen, said this, "Remember, in the end, nobody wins unless everybody wins." So true. So now for the action, for the part where we get to give you some tools to be empowered. We want to turn this week's message into action. Messages matter most when they lead to organizing and engaging with our communities. So this week, start with something very simple. Tell your loved one about Couch to Campaign Trail. This is, of course, the social media tool, text messaging program that allows people who are just getting involved to be nudged along with little meaningful actions sent by text that build their voice, their confidence, and our momentum towards victory in November. And our second call to action this week, and what I'm asking you to do today, is share the graphics we're sharing on the screen right now with your networks. You can actually go to dfl.org/daily, and you'll see these graphics there. We're going to be posting these graphics all over our social media, so you can go and pull them from there and post them on your own personal pages or any organizations that you're a part of. So that's it. That's this week's message memo, folks. Now you have the message, the action, and the tools to be empowered. Remember, the theme this week is affordability. The message is simple: Minnesota values versus Republican priorities. Keep that idea at the center of your conversations this week and help us amplify it far and wide. Thanks, everybody, for all you're doing to help build the largest electoral defeat of a sitting president in the history of Minnesota midterms. We're going to do just that 204 days from now. Thank you again, and let's go win this thing.